I was born in Harrison County, Corydon, Indiana. I was raised on a farm. There was a brother there and my mother and my two grandparents and no dad. We always went to church, as Nia said in her testimony, 2 to 3 times a week, but there was chaos at times. Not having a father figure in the home was difficult, but I found out who my father was pretty early, and he was in the Navy, and I got support for the whole 18 years. As I say, we were poor but happy. We had the joy of the Lord through it all. 10 years old, my mom married my stepfather, and my brother stayed at the farm with the grandparents, and I went with my mother and stepfather. The 7 years that I was there were not real good years. My stepfather at that time, even though we went to church and tried to serve the Lord, he didn't have children. So he was a little different, and I was not real happy there. But I loved my mother, and no one was going to separate me from my mother. I still had contact with my brother and my grandparents. And after I started driving, if I got upset or didn't like the way things were going, I'd just go up and stay all night with Grandma and Grandpa. I met Bill summer of 1972. He was going to do his student teaching. He was a biology teacher, and he was going to do his student teaching at Leavenworth. July 4th, I went to the fireworks at English, and I met Bill, and it's been fireworks ever since. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to be dating someone that's going to be a teacher. But we just played it low. I even went to the prom with another friend. I saw him one time a week on Friday nights. But the day after I graduated, I moved out. There was a family right up the road from my grandparents that had a trailer for rent, and they knew me, and I already had a job. I was working at the youth program at that time, the summer youth program. So, and I had a car, so I moved out, and I continued to go visit my grandparents. I continued to go visit my parents, and like 3 months later, I got the job that I actually retired from, the state job. I wasn't 18, I was 17 when I moved out. And so 3 months later, I turned 18, and I got a job at the state of Indiana. It was the food stamp clerk at that time. And then worked for about a year and a half, lived on my own because Bill was not ready to get married yet. At that point, I had a real good job, kept working, and after a year and a half, I finally asked him to marry me.
I was born grew up in Eckerty, Indiana. I lived in a storybook world. I had a mom and dad, a biological sister, and a brother. I never heard my parents argue. I didn't have any idea what family issues were, but I mean, when I grew up, I realized that my mom had that dysfunctional family in her life, so she made sure that we didn't. So I graduated from English high school in 1969, went to college, and like Sharon said, I was in the summer of '72, I was a junior in college, heading back to college. And that year I had made arrangements to do my student teaching at Leavenworth. And so here I am, I go to the 4th of July celebration in English with friends, and all of a sudden, there's this, and I made a statement, and I said, I'd like to meet her. So we were introduced that night, I took her home, and I had no idea what I was getting into. I waited a couple of weeks to call back. I wasn't sure what to do, but I'd already, you have those notions in your head. So I figured this is going to be something serious. So anyway, I took her home. I called back 2 weeks later to follow up, and I'm told that if we went out, I had to cut my hair and go to church on Sunday night. If anyone else would have said that, I would definitely no. Of course, I was raised in church, but you know how it is. So I decided that wasn't for me, and here I am cutting my hair and going to church on Sunday night. At that point, I'm 21 years old, far too young to get too serious about that. I got a job in Cloverport, Kentucky. My first teaching job was in Cloverport, Kentucky, so it's not that far away, but I moved, and so it was weekends or this or that, and Sharon wanted some kind of a major commitment, and so therefore she was searching around, and so it finally ends up that she says, look, I'm going to marry somebody. I'm going to ask you first. If you say no, I'm going to look elsewhere. And so by that time, I'm agreeing to the whole process. And so January the 18th, 1975, we got married.
After that 1 year teaching at Cloverport.
Well, I had to move home.
Yeah, there wasn't a teaching job available, and you worked at Mulcher's for 13 years in the office because your dad had retired from there. And so after that, you went back to school and got some classes in special ed and decided to teach special ed, and you got a job in special ed.
Ultimately, our life together began July the 4th, 1972. And fireworks, I guess, as she says, come January, that'll be 50 years ago. We always went to church. There was never a time, I think, when we didn't go. But the first 5 years, we were childless. We had our first child after we were married 5 years, and then Nia came along 10 years into the marriage. But we always went to church. My life was pretty easy. And as a result of that, here I'm irresponsible and a lot of things. But Sharon had, when you graduate on a Friday night and move out on a Saturday morning, there's some motivation. So she was definitely the leader in that. But it was like that. I mean, she was going to make sure that we went to church and that we were raising those kids that way. Age brings things on, but my outlook on that is very different today than it would have been back years ago. We did the Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night thing, and that wasn't a bad thing, but sometimes we just went.
And we went to the Full Gospel Church. It's now called Tower Full Gospel. Started out Dry Run Full Gospel when we were first married.
Sharon's dad passed away in 1988. And there was a relationship at that time. We had actually gone, he had renal cancer, and we had actually gone, he lived in Virginia Beach, and we had gone to Virginia and took him to Bethesda, Maryland, to the National Institute of Health, and they basically told him there was nothing they could do. So he passed away, and here's what's ironic. Her stepmother packed her bags and moved to Marengo, Indiana, left biological siblings, a biological daughter in Virginia, and moved to Marengo, and our kids walked to her house after school every day. So what was a very complicated thing was very much simplified. At that point, Sharon's mom and stepdad would come to her house in the evenings for a meal, all kinds of positive things as a result of that.
And I had a half sister that moved here later. She spent several years here, and we have a good relationship.
She attends our church service every day via camera.
She gets to watch our service on Sundays, and she loves that.
So our lives, hopefully we're bearing some kind of fruit. That's where you had gone.
That's where I'd gone. And we went there until I was age 47. Nia was 16. and she got involved in youth under Anthony Moore at Paoli Wesleyan, and she was drawn there with other teenagers and just so excited. And also Nate came there. He came there on Wednesday nights, and she had met him. And so at that time, they were trying to make a decision on a minister at the church we were at. And that wasn't happening that fast. So we felt led to start going to Paoli Wesleyan. And that's where, we stayed there until Lyndall came to Marengo. He came to Marengo Church, and then we started going to Marengo Wesleyan.
Well, that worked out because at that point my mom was having health issues, and so thank goodness for my nieces and nephews. I'm one of three, I mentioned that, but my brother died at 52 of a heart attack. My sister died at 61. So I was the lone child left, but my sister's children certainly stepped up and helped with that. But we did our cycle of staying with my mom. And so that Marengo setting, we live between Marengo and English, so that really worked, that we could go to church and then head to my mom's house for our turns in that. So we did that and stayed at Marengo then until time's terrible for me. A few years back. Mm-hmm. So, but that's then Nia's enthusiasm about the church kind of was contagious, and so we caught on and did that. So what I find, and I'm assuming she'll agree with this, that when the tough times came, that's really when we began to grow. Our son had some health issues. He's, as I already said, 5 years older than Nia, but he had some asthma issues, but was nothing life-threatening. When we talk about Nia, that's a totally different story. I think it was July the 19th, 2005. Sharon and I had been in Tennessee. We get a phone call from Nia that says, I think I'm gonna have to go to the eye doctor. My vision's blurry. So she called us and went ahead to an appointment. And then I think she went to urgent care or a doctor's appointment.
They thought it was sinus.
And they did a scan and said, you have a sinus infection. And so by this time, we're home, we come home.
You take her to college
and
because she had trouble.
So she's having these vision problems. So whatever day that was, she had a chemistry class at IUS that summer. And so she asked me to take her. So I drove her to IUS that evening. And then the next day I go to my mom's to mow, and I get a phone call that Nia had called Sharon, that she had dialed the phone and told Sharon.
Yeah, she had told me, she said, Mom, I'm feeling really weird. And she said, I don't know if this is sinus or not. And I said, well, lay down on the floor. I'm 5 minutes away here from the Office of Family and Children. I'll be there in just a few minutes. And when I got there, she was in like a fetal position, starting to have like a seizure. And I called 911, and they came, and we went to Floyd County Hospital. And of course, it wasn't long at all till they said, she's got a brain.
They said this is far beyond anything we can deal with here.
Yeah, it's going to be a brain tumor, and you were going to have to transfer her over to Louisville. And so that started the journey. And actually, we were in the hospital with her 16 days, and it was 8 days before they were able to do surgery on her. So then we were there 8 days longer after they did surgery. But they just kept saying,
Well, it was U of L, and so somebody would get shot and they'd have an emergency. And so I think a couple of times we were standing outside the surgery room waiting, and they'd say, this takes priority.
It was a journey, but there was so many people praying And, there's when our faith began to really, it took a turn totally different than we'd ever had before. You had to walk by the faith you had then, and you had more than you realized you had.
I think that when you can't, I like to control everything. And when you can't control anything, then you have to sacrifice that will, and you have to realize that that whole story, which probably a lot of people know that, but she was given a 25% chance of survival at U of L. And what's really bizarre is our son's wife, our daughter-in-law, Christy, her best friend was a nurse in the emergency room at U of L. And so that was one connection. So she's behind the scenes getting information.
Telling us the best doctor to have.
We got to pick the surgeon, Vitas was his name, and he was the best. So, we get this inside scoop on all of that. And then, the surgery goes well, and it's a 12 hours. Brain surgery, she's upside down, and it's just incredible that, and when the surgeon leaves, he said she may not breathe on her own, she may not be able to swallow. I don't know, I get emotional just thinking about that day. And so we weren't sure what to expect, so Sharon couldn't handle the respirator thing very well. So Nate and I went in, and it was like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, and they said she might be asleep for hours. And she said, get this tube out. None of the things that they warned us about happened. And so we were just thrilled to death about that. So they got 95% of the tumor, 5% left, and they couldn't do any of that because it was all, nerves, and it was called medulloblastoma, and so fearful to do any more because they could get all those things that we were talking about before. And then in the midst of that, we're thinking about treatments or whatever. Once again, our daughter-in-law, Christy, her sister-in-law worked for St. Jude. And so we get this message that you do know that these people have never seen anyone Nia's age with medulloblastoma. It's 3 to 11 years old or whatever, 3 to 10. And here is a phone number if you want to call St. Jude to find out. So is there anything I'm missing there?
No, you didn't. So
we made that phone call and called a lady named Jennifer Havens, and she said, I don't suppose you could be here tomorrow. And Nia's decision, she was 20, of course, and so our decision was made that we would indeed pack our bags and move to Memphis.
That's when our life changed totally, because we were already walking by faith at the hospital, knowing God was going to bring us through. I felt strongly. He gave me faith that I didn't even know I had through that time. But we knew God was going to bring us through. And then going to St. Jude, when we got there, the first thing the radiologist doctor said,
Dr. Crazen, no.
Dr. Crazen said, Nia, you'll look back and this will be a bump in the road. And down there, it changed. And Nia told this in her testimony, but a very important factor was the scans from Louisville showed it was in the spine. And when they pulled them up in front of us at St. Jude, it was gone in the spine. It was clear. The one had it in it, showed it, and the one down there had it clear. And so we knew from there, our faith just continually just grew. And the walk with the Lord was totally different. You were talking to him all through the day, because she would have tests, and we left our jobs. We both had days build up.
There were actually 6 days back then.
Yeah, so you had several 6 days. You didn't have to take FMLA. You could take your days, and so we had several build up.
I think we each used 80.
Yeah, so we both stayed the first 3 weeks with her until they made decisions on what they were going to do and how long it was going to take, and it lessened totally. They said 5 to 6 months of treatment, and you'll pretty much be done. We'll start with radiation, and and then you're going to have some chemo treatment, but pretty much by March you're going to be done. And that changed the whole story. We just knew God was walking with us. So then we would trade off. I would go back to work and stay a week and work. And then at that time, I worked from Monday through Thursday. I worked full day, 4 days. And just as soon as I got on Thursday, I would head to Memphis, 7-hour drive. And we got to be together on weekends. And then Bill would come home and I would stay a week. And then we did that off and on all the time she was there. One would stay a week, one would come for the weekend. And again, even Nathan got to come and be with her. And he was faithful to show his love and his strength from the Lord. And he grew at that time too, along with Nia, because there were 2 other girls.
Yes, how many 20-year-olds that were there when we came home?
One. And their boyfriends left them before.
One came home.
And so Nia came home, and Nia still had her boyfriend, Nathan. And again, that's because we were walking with the Lord, and Nathan was walking with the Lord. And again, our faith grew totally different. We've not been the same since. That miracle in itself has changed our life, and then we've had more miracles since.
I think as long as we believe we can take care of the issues in life, you don't depend on God. Right? I mean, if I can take care of it, what do I need? And to be honest, we never really had any big issues. So we didn't face anything really big until then. And it was a bump in the road, and it was big.
We find ourselves, if we're raised in church, and I was raised in a pretty conservative church, and to be honest, I felt like I was doing what man said to do, and then if I stood before Jesus, that would work good enough. But as I got a stronger walk with the Lord and felt his presence so greatly through Nia's cancer, I knew that if I stood before Jesus, that wasn't going to work. I would have to have in my heart what I was doing for him to be right, not what someone told me to do. I had to have the relationship with him that I felt the desire to read his word, to talk to him every day. The love grew for Jesus totally different then. Sometimes we go through the motions. And, I found myself from a young child doing that because I'd been raised up in it. And I was just expected, to go to church, and I was expected to do certain things, and I was expected to look a certain way and act a certain way. And Lord forbid if you ever admit that you're really having lots of trouble, or you're just really you're really sinning.
It's a sign of weakness.
You really sinned today. You wouldn't want anybody to know that. But when I would confess and talk to the Lord about it, I knew that there was a greater walk than I had been walking. And that changed my life. And I've never been the same. Never. And I never will be the same because that relationship with him is totally different than going through the motions or trying to be the best you can be. I cannot be the best I can be without Jesus in my heart, helping me each day. And so that is a different feeling. That's a different feeling than I had early on in in a younger age, because I never felt I was really good enough to. I was a positive person, but I never felt I was good enough to reach the ultimate goal that was required of me. I just now, since that time, since Nia's sickness, some of the things we've gone through, I know I don't have to be good enough. He's good enough. And so he takes care of anything that I would feel that would be less of me. He gives me his righteousness and covers me. And that's exactly what I need.
I think those things that have happened, and maybe negative, I don't know if it's whatever anyway, but I think that's changed us to the point where we can't just talk. We have to put some action into it. So we've been active in a lot of things that hopefully help people. That would be our desire, that we could make a difference. And I mean, if God can perform a miracle in our lives, why not for other people as well? So at some point, we're getting older. We're not old, but we're getting older, or mature. And so I retired in 2013. Sharon retired. She wasn't going to retire because she wasn't going to feel fulfilled. And so along comes Ava. So there's a decision made. I'm going to help babysit. But when the time came, it was she was born in January. Sharon retired in February of 2014. And between Linda and our help, they never had another babysitter as far as I know.
Kids.
So we took care of the kids. That gave us a very good purpose in life. And along that time, I won't mention names, but a good friend of ours who attended Valeene Wesleyan's son happened to end up in jail. And he was in, for reasons, he was in Orange County jail. And so I don't know, it was just this feeling that I needed to go to see him. And so I began to make arrangements to go with Chad to the jail services in Orange County Jail. And that happened, but I didn't see the person I went to see for a while. And I saw him every week for a long time. But I ran across a kid that Sharon and I had picked up and taken to Paoli Wesleyan when he was a young kid, and he ended up being in there, and so we kind of rekindled that relationship. And as that developed, when you develop a relationship with people, that gives you an opportunity to make a difference. And so that all came about, that many of these guys got tremendous sentences, 12, 13, 14 years. And as a result of that, they would end up in prison. So Sharon and I decided that we would train to be mentors, and we would go to Branchville and mentor. We went every week for a number of years and followed the guys from Orange County to Branchville. So I realized then that these were people just like me. They got caught and had tremendous backstory. The home life and such was just horrendous. So we began to follow them, and I realized that when they got out of jail, there were no jobs available. There was no housing available. Nothing was available. So as a result of that, you know what happened? The only thing they knew how to do is what they did. So they would cycle back through. And so we began trying to think of some ways that we could help, and the idea was to form some kind of a organization to provide a halfway house, some kind of assistance. And that happened, the first meeting of that, which ended up being Giving Recovery a Chance Every Day, aka Grace House. The first meeting was held in the annex down here in 2017. So that all came about as a result, the Grace House, multiple buildings at this point, but the Grace House opened as a women's facility.
I volunteered there 2 or 3 days a week, half days for sure, for the first 6 months to a year. And then we were able to get more to volunteer, and I didn't have to as much.
We actually got people hired.
Right.
But long story short, then the Crawford County Commissioners leased us a building in Marengo where the original Grace House is. They leased that to us for $1 a year. So we currently have 10 men residents.
We
But
had women for 3 years. We had women for 3 years, and then now it.
Well, what happened is the fire marshal came one day and said you can't have people living in here because it was a county-owned property, and so they were treating it as a commercial building. And so at that point, there was another house opening in Corydon called Genesis House. So all the women moved to Corydon. That left us with an empty building, and assuming that we can't use it, well, the county attorney rewrote the deed to the point where we could open back up. So it opened up as a men. In 2018, it opened back up as a men's facility. Currently, there are 10 people there. The Valeene Wesleyan building was donated to Grace. At this point, there's Recovery Church there on a Saturday night. Personal counseling out of Clarksville they have music therapy and counseling in there. One of the guys, Bill, wrote a grant for about $350,000. So anybody dealing with the jail or the judicial system goes through that counseling. I mentioned the Recovery Church.
The NA,
someday.
The dinners on Monday night.
Oh yeah, NA meeting Monday night.
It was always a dinner.
And a dinner, and so I mean it's functional. And then as the guys now, as they graduate the Grace House, the 10-bed facility, we've created another building. The old First Savings Bank was donated to Grace at Milltown, and so now we have 4 beds over there that is a transition facility to give the guys another year or so of help. So that all came about, and I tell them all the time that I wasn't the kind of guy who would care. And I think the whole deal with Nia, you always have to be open to something. And I go to Branchville every Friday, and I tell them, and I drove by the jail, and I drove by the prison, and I didn't give a care who was in there because I didn't know anybody. And at that point, my philosophy was they've done the crime, do the time. And I didn't realize that they live in a different world than me. I don't have any of their experiences. I have addictions, but they're coffee and chocolate, socially acceptable and legal kind of things, but it's all the same. And so anyway, our life as that role probably came out of a negative experience because we got to see people in a different light. God has a plan. I'm willing, but I didn't go out of my way to do that. It was a different world. And I taught school at English Elementary, and when I started there, I had no idea those people lived there. Is that sad? I had no idea. Sharon did, because that was
The
people.
welfare.
And so I would have these kids come in and they say, oh, I was in your wife's office today. I saw your picture. And we didn't know, because to be honest, all of our friends were college educated. Right? I mean, not that makes us good, but we were exempt from reality. You know, Neil will tell the story that she graduated from Crawford County in 2003, never saw a drug. We now have friends who graduated from Crawford County High School in 2003 that started a drug addiction in the 7th grade. So
But she didn't
it's there, but
see
we
it.
have to see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we are. We have to have something to get us to see, and hopefully we continue to see.
I had to be on board with Bill, and when
She
this
didn't
first happened, I did not have the compassion for the people like the Lord put on Bill's heart. And when people would start asking Bill for money or needing this or that, and there was a lot of them, you really had to pray about it and have discernment. And I thought at first quite a bit Bill was taken for granted and being used. And I didn't have it in my heart like he did. But once I started going and mentoring with him, talking to them and seeing the need was so great, not everybody was using us. They needed us. And, Jesus said in his word about going and helping those in the prison and whatever. And Jesus says, you're helping me if you do that. And not everybody can do that, but that's the piece of the pie that a lot of people's left out. And we have to have a work to do for him if we're doing his will. And as Bill said, God had a plan in this. And definitely this plan has played out because we have seen so many lives changed. And we have gotten relationships with folks that I would have never thought we'd had a relationship with. They sure don't look like me. Some of them are filled with tattoos, and it's hard for me to sometimes get past that because I wasn't raised to understand those very well. But Bill said I can look at somebody even in prison that's full of them, and I don't see that. And I said, well, I'm not there yet, but I do love them. And God's given us love.
Currently, probably my best friend is someone I met about 7 or 8 years ago in the Crawford County Jail. And he texts me every morning. My phone will ding at 7:30 a.m. every morning with a scripture. And today I've talked to him several times. So Sharon and I picked up a guy. I had an eye doctor's appointment today. So we picked up a guy at the Grace House. And so she dropped me off at the eye doctor's office. And then she took this guy to an interview in Corydon. And then she came back and got me, but my friend Steve picked up the guy in Corydon and took him back
to the Grace
home.
House.
So you'll be surprised the wonderful people you'll meet in the strangest places. Well, I don't know if you know, but on August the 9th, 2021, I had a heart attack. So my brother died at 52 of a heart attack. My dad died of a heart attack. My grandpa died of a heart attack. And so they tell me I have bad genes for that. But anyway, so I wake Sharon up in the middle of the night and I say, man, there's something major going on here, like I'm having chest pains. And so I said, well, you're going to have to take me somewhere. And so I talked to her again, and she's asleep again. She went back to sleep. And so I said, you're going to have to take me somewhere. So in the midst of the COVID epidemic, she takes me to the ER room in Baptist Floyd. and they have no beds. They have no place to put me, so they put me in a chair behind a curtain somewhere. And so, come to find out, at the end of the day, they put in a stent, and I'm watching this guy, and he said, yeah, you had 99% blockage in your widowmaker, but you're okay now. He said, you go home in the morning. So I was home before lunch the next day. And I don't know why those things happen, but here I sit 3 years later, and so far no problems. But, it's a wake-up call every time, isn't it?
Well, for me, man, I was told 9/11 last year, 2023, that I did have breast cancer, invasive carcinoma breast cancer. I was cooking that night for the NA supper, and the doctor calls at 4:30, and I thought, well, this is a journey I'm going to have to go on, but we got to go to the NA supper first. And so then I'll go to the appointment the next day or two and find out what I need to do. But again, once you've been through something that takes a lot of faith, for me, I just knew that the Lord was going to take care of me. And the very first appointment I had, when they told me I was going to have to go through hard chemo for 4 months, and then I needed surgery, and then I needed radiation, they said it's curable and treatable. And that's the only thing that I needed to hear. That gave me the faith that I said, it doesn't matter what I have to go through. I'm going to be fine. And so certainly you have to take the Lord with you through this, because the 4 months of chemo, thinking back how hard Nia had, and it was double what she went through to what I went through. But it was very, very difficult at times. And after every chemo treatment, I couldn't eat I just continually had a sick feeling up until about 10 days before I would take the treatment again. And I'd be able to eat and feel better. And, for Bill, that was probably as hard on him as it was me.
Being a caregiver is hard.
Because he would try different things, and he threw out a lot of food.
I would cook, and she'd look at it.
I'd say, no, I'm not able to eat that. But, the Lord was with me. They give you medicines and different things to take through that time. The Lord was with me, and you have a lot of time to talk to him more and read his word to encourage your heart. And I would just say, there were times I couldn't go to church because my levels were too low. So I'd watch church online. There were times I couldn't have anybody around because I could have gotten in an infection, that type of thing. But once I got through that, I want to say that when I got through in December, then they told me I was going to have surgery in February. So they gave me a break, and I was pretty sick, but Bill said,
we canceled 4 vacations.
We need to get away at least for a short period of time. And I said, well, if we go today and she releases me, hit that one spot that's left, because we couldn't find any place left. And I said, hit that one spot.
No beach condos left.
For 11 days, and we will go, and I'll get away, and we'll be able to relax some. And he did, and we even had friends to come and stay with us.
The two of us, we had a 3-bedroom apartment, so we're calling everybody saying, come on over.
We had friends that have come down the past couple of years and come over, and they came over and stayed with us a couple of nights, Reggie and Luann Timberlake. And we just had kind of a retreat of time. We got to unwind and watch different singing on TV.
The waves.
And we watched the waves, and we just had a good time, and the Lord blessed me.
Lord willing, December 27th,
We'll go back for a month.
and the whole month of January, we'll be doing the same thing.
But as I say, when I came back home and I went to surgery, I must tell you about the miracle that happened. They told me I was going to have a double mastectomy, and they said, we found it in several of your lymph nodes on the left side.
Well, she had a clear mammogram in February of 23. By August of 23, it spread to lymph nodes and skin. 6 months.
So they said, this is the kind that we have to, it was stage 3. So this is the kind we have to get rid of totally. So it won't come back. So you're going to need a double mastectomy, and you're going to need all of the lymph nodes taken out on the left side, 15. So I said, okay, whatever I need to do, we'll do it. So when I went that morning for surgery, of course, the family came up, and David and Linda came to pray with me before I went down to surgery. And while they were praying for me, the doctor walks in, and I could feel the presence of somebody, and I opened an eye and saw him standing there with his arms folded. And Dave was just talking to the Lord, Linda was too, about guide the surgeon's hands and just be with Sharon and do a complete healing, and all of the wonderful things that I needed to hear in prayer. And after they opened their eyes, I said, that's my doctor.
He's the surgeon.
He's the surgeon. And so they shook hands with him and left, because it's time for me to go down. So I had the surgery, and my niece, Claire House, had told me she's been through a protocol almost like mine in breast cancer. So she had kind of helped me along the way, telling me what was going to happen through chemo and this and that. She's been a great encourager to me. She said, I'm going to pray that you have no pain. And I just believed that. My faith was so strong. I just believed that. So after I got through the surgery and I woke up the next day, the day of the surgery, they said, well, all of that's going to come back. And I said, well, I might be sore, but I don't feel any pain. I feel no pain
She made
whatsoever.
me walk around that hospital.
I said, Bill, get me up.
She wore me out.
Let's walk, let's exercise, let's do everything I can. And they told me that I could have lymphedema in this arm and it could swell. So immediately I just started rubbing it and talking to the Lord and praying and saying, Lord, now you can help me on that. You've helped me on everything else. Well, then the doctor comes in and says, oh, the other side where we didn't take any lymph nodes out, looks like there could be a blood clot there. We're probably going to have to take you back down to surgery tomorrow again. And we're going to have to probably clean that out and do something with that. We're going to wait overnight, he said. And he said, I'll be back tomorrow and we'll check that out. Well, he sent an assistant back. She looked, she said, oh yeah, you're going to have surgery. I said, well, Lord, whatever you say. But I had prayed and asked the Lord, I said, now, if I didn't have to go through this surgery again and through the anesthetic and all of that, I would just be really thrilled. But if I have to, I'll do what I need to do. Got down to the hospital room, the operating room. There was the anesthesiologist guy. There was the other assistant nurses. There was all of things ready to operate on me again. And he comes in and he puts his hand on this side and I put my hand there. And he said, well, prayers worked again. That's gone down. You guys will have to all go home. I'm sorry I called you in on a Saturday.
I made it across the street to Chick-fil-A and he calls. The doctor calls and said, I'm sending her home.
Now that was a true miracle to me because, coming back out of the medicine and having another surgery and going through several things, because you already have tubes you have to have on for 2 weeks, and there's a lot of process with that. And it would have been a lot bigger process, but God took care of that. And as I say, I asked him then, I said, Dr. McCormick, I said, how often does this happen? And he said, oh, maybe 3% of the time. So I knew then that God had performed.
So we went
a
home
miracle.
that day.
We went home. And I just want to proclaim that miracle, because I could have gone through another hard surgery, and if it had been a blood clot, that could have caused problems where it would have gone in between. And I really think God took care of that. And so walking with Him makes the total difference.
These things that we're talking about, we always realize that, you know, the doctors can do whatever, but in all reality, we're giving the credit to God, because the doctors can do what they do, but the healing still has to be done. And so, anyway, we want everybody to know that, I mean, we've had some bumps in the road, but certainly, I tell the guys all the time that who in this world would not want to trade places with me? Well, it's not easy, it's not perfect, but we sure have a good life. We live in a log cabin in the woods, and we have great porches, and we love to travel. I mean, the things that we get to do are just amazing, and God's provided for us to be healthy enough to get out and go and do and provide whatever services we can.
For me, the experience of going through something that a doctor says there's not a very big chance. 25% chance is not a good chance. And yet feeling a total different feeling straight from heaven makes it makes all the difference in the world. I mean, if you can't feel that, and if you don't have Jesus inside to walk with you through those things, you're not going to have a very good time in this life, because there's things going to come in this life, and Jesus said there's going to be trouble, but I've overcome the world. So that definitely was trouble, without a greater walk with the Lord, and these things make you have a greater walk. Without a greater walk with the Lord, you cannot face it and have the stability that we had. People would say to me, Sharon, you know, I break down when I come and talk to you about Nia, and you don't even cry. I said, well, there's nothing to cry about. God's going to take care of Nia. Now, later years, you know, the emotion play has been a little different on me, but I will say the whole time I went through that with her, I was age 50. He gave me strength that I didn't even know I had. I mean, it's not anything that anybody else can give me. I can't buy it. I can't find it anywhere. It has to come straight from God.
Well, in addition to that, we had great community support, church support.
Oh, the prayers were unreal.
I mean, you just can't imagine. It was really crazy, because financially, we were okay. We already told you we used sick days, so we didn't miss a paycheck. But people wanted to give, and you can't deny people opportunities. And so I think that when you're on the receiving end, that's something we hadn't been. But then we realized that that's a good opportunity for us to give back. And, you know, I already mentioned that when we were at St. Jude, there were only 3 20-year-olds there. One of those came home. Now, not everybody, we've talked about some pretty serious health issues here. We have that storybook ending so far. Not everybody gets that, you know, so we got to realize how blessed we are. And in all reality, without these, I don't want to use the word bad things, but without these things happening to us, I don't think we would be the people we are today, you know. And I think I need to tell people that not embrace the pain, but certainly realize that that God can work on. He can provide that good out of a very negative situation. I mean, I'm a prime example. You know, I didn't have compassion for people that weren't like me. I didn't have that. And when you see a place like St. Jude, it's incredible. Anything you see on TV doesn't hold a candle to the real world. There are people that would see Nia coming into, let's say, the medicine room, and they would run open arms and give her a hug. I mean, it was like her doctor was like number 4 in the world. His name was Dr. Gujar. He was from India. And Nia had their cell phone numbers, and they had her cell phone number. And when Dr. Gujar got any kind of test results, he would hunt us down. It didn't matter where we were in the hospital. He would barge in. This is what I have. I mean, and so like, it was such a different world. Those people were such servants. You go in any room and there were scriptures posted on the walls. I mean, it was like you couldn't deny that. And so I think if I were telling somebody, I'd say, no, don't embrace the pain, but make sure that you don't let that opportunity pass to be grateful that you become a better person, or, you know, like a big old block of stone, marble, or whatever. You have to chip away the waste. Whoever that sculptor is, see something inside of that. And so I think I look at that as chipping stuff away from me, and hopefully something good will present itself at some point. The main thing is just to get the message across that, I mean, people would look at that and say, oh, how sad.
But it isn't.
But it's not. Yeah. But like I said, we have our ending thus far is very different, you know. We're continuing the journey.
Amen. Yeah.